Here are 5 books that will fix your brain. So what do I know about fixing brains? I'm not a therapist or a doctor. 5 years ago, I had a complete mental breakdown, just crippling anxiety. In fact, it wasn't just anxiety. It was anxiety with like every other mental illness sprinkled on top. It was like anxiety, OCD, eventually depression. I wanted to end myself. If you're poor in America having a mental health crisis, to those that are watching this and aren't in America and don't know this, there's no mental health care really for poor people in the United States of America. At best, you'll maybe get some annoyed doctor to throw some pills at you and say, here, take these for the rest of your life. If I were wealthy or came from a wealthy family, I probably would have been hospitalized or sent off to some facility to straighten me out. Since I'm poor, that wasn't an option, so I had pills thrown at me. To which I got heavily addicted to Xanax. And of course, my tolerance went up, so I had to keep taking more and more dangerously large doses. Which Xanax, a lot of people don't realize, is one of the few drugs that you can actually die coming off of it from the withdrawals. Like, I think alcohol and Xanax, like, the withdrawals can actually kill you. You'll have seizures and die. I was also prescribed Zoloft, which I took Zoloft and had every adverse side effect associated with Zoloft, including wanting to end myself, which is not the type of person that I am. I've never had those kind of thoughts. I wasn't eating, I was deathly skinny, was barely sleeping. I heard generalized anxiety described once as, when you're sitting in a chair and you're leaning back and the chair starts falling backwards and you're like frantically waving your arms around to like keep from falling backwards. That second of panic that you have when you're falling backwards in a chair, imagine that little moment of panic extended from the second you wake up until the second you manage to somehow fall asleep at night. That's where I was. Barely functioning, but having to function because I'm poor, so I had to go to work and pay the bills through the entire thing. So out of desperation, I took it into my own hands. As you can probably guess, I'm kind of a methodical OCD researcher. So I took it into my own hands to save myself. I was literally fighting for my life. So I tapered off the Zoloft. I tapered off the Xanax, which Xanax is like as addictive as heroin. I've never done heroin, but I've heard. And I entered into a program of my own making. Here are the 5 main books that literally saved my life. There were a lot of others, but these were the 5 core books in order of importance from like most to least. I'm starting with the most important books. And annoyingly and unfortunately, I don't know where most of these books are in the apartment because honestly, I haven't looked at these books in like a few years. Because there's a tendency of once you climb out of the hole, you kind of tend to kick the ladder away once you're out. So I don't know where I put most of these books. I have some of them that I found. And I'm also hastily recording this video before I go to work. I didn't want to have to tear the apartment apart to find these books. So anyway, sorry, here are the books. Also, just a quick note, I'm not a mental health professional. This is my own personal experience. This is how I saved my life with these books. And so the first book in my entry point to this whole thing was Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, Techniques for Retraining Your Brain by Professor Jason M. Satterfield. It's an audiobook. It's part of the Great Courses series. The reason why I had to start with that, and the thing is, I was so deeply mentally ill, I couldn't sit down and read a book. I could barely even listen to the audiobook. I was so caught up in like looping thoughts and freaking out that there's no way I was going to sit down and read a book and like, think about it. So basically what I had to do was download this Great Courses audiobook and go on marathon walks around San Francisco with my headphones on, listening to this cognitive behavioral therapy book. And it's an overview of cognitive behavioral therapy, how it works. It has like actual snippets of therapy sessions. It gave me hope that it was possible that maybe I could be a functioning human being again instead of suffering inside a hell within my own skull. It's a great entry point. You can put it on while you're distracting yourself with something else. I would suggest going on long walks and listening to it. If you're having a major episode of anxiety or depression and you don't have access to the medical help you should have access to, but we all know realistically, at least in the United States, most people don't have access. This is the book. Listen to it, and walk. The next book, which I cannot find, although I do have it somewhere here in the apartment, The Worry Trick by David Carbonell. Incredibly important. I think the reason The Worry Trick was so helpful for me is because he approaches the whole thing with a lot of humor. I mean, the book's not like hilarious or anything. It's a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy stuff, and I think a lot of like acceptance and commitment therapy stuff. It's a lot of therapy stuff. He's a therapist. But the way he approaches it is very accessible and kind of funny. If you have chronic generalized anxiety, or even just like feel like you kind of worry too much sometimes, it's a great book. There's also an audiobook version, which I bought that also, and it's also great. It was incredibly helpful. I probably listened to the entire book like 1,000 times. And at this point, I should probably say, just buying these books isn't going to fix your brain. Just buying these books and reading these books isn't going to fix your brain. You have to buy these books, read these books, and do the work these books require of you. With cognitive behavioral therapy, I know there's all these like worksheets and all this stuff. You just don't want to do it, especially if you're deep in the depths of like anxiety or depression, but you literally have to do the work to get out. You have to claw your way out of the pit of anxiety and despair by doing the work. One of the big things that I got out of The Worry Trick by David Carbonell is that you aren't your thoughts. The book really shows you how to treat your maybe obsessive worrying thoughts like they are just like an annoying relative that you don't have to pay attention to. You don't have to take your thoughts so seriously. They're just thoughts. It's a great book. Pick it up. Next up is Dare by Barry McDonagh. McDonagh. It really breaks down the physicality of anxiety and panic attacks and panic anxiety disorder. It breaks down the physical manifestations piece by piece. And as a result, you stop taking the physical manifestations of anxiety so seriously. It kind of breaks the loop of anxiety of like, oh, I feel anxious and my heart's racing and oh no, am I having a heart attack and this and that. And then my mouth's really dry and I'm getting tunnel vision. And it's like all the panic attack loop. This book serves to break that. If you're plagued by panic attacks, which I'm not really, but I've had them, Dare, this book will end your panic attacks. There's also a lot of stuff in the book about running toward your fears, which is also an aspect of cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, where you're exposing yourself to your deepest fears to inevitably realize that your greatest fears aren't as scary as you thought they were. But exposure therapy works in a deep brain level that you're not even conscious of. It's like those horrible TV shows where someone's afraid of snakes and they put them in a room full of snakes and lock them in there and they freak out. But that is a real therapy and it really does work. But yeah, Dare. Barry McDonagh. There's a workbook and there's apps and stuff. I didn't do the other stuff. I didn't do the workbook or the apps. I just read the book. But I read it over and over again. It was great. It was really helpful. It was mostly about handling the physicality of anxiety and panic. Next up is Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Made Simple by Seth J. Gillihan, PhD. This is the next best thing to going to a cognitive behavioral therapist. This book is the things that you would do if you were going to go talk to a therapist. All the worksheets, all the stuff, sorting yourself out. It was very nuts and bolts, just going through the steps, doing the work. Basically putting all the theory into practice. Next up, we have Rewire Your Anxious Brain, How to Use the Neuroscience of Fear to End Anxiety, Panic, and Worry by Catherine Pittman, PhD, and Elizabeth M. Karle, MLIS. My main takeaways from this book that I can remember now years later was the neuroscience behind changing your brain. Because it's possible, as crazy as it sounds, you can create mental habits that create certain physical pathways in your brain because of these mental habits that you repeat. So you can literally, with your thoughts, change the physical structure of your brain. So this book goes into that, the neuroscience. This book really opened my eyes to the amygdala, the like little lizard brain in the middle of your brain. That's like the panic button of your brain, which is how they think Xanax works, is it kind of anesthetizes your amygdala. So it's like you physically almost can't have that lizard brain reaction to fear. But this book just helps you to understand what you're working with in here, like the physical structures of it. The book is really accessible, but it's not too dumbed down. It's just a great book. It's a book that I also got in audiobook form and would listen to it over and over again. Especially the stuff about the amygdala, which really fascinated me, which in turn helped me to remove myself from the anxious looping thoughts. Once I could see those thoughts as just the reactions of an overactive amygdala that I've inherited from a long line of people born with overactive amygdalas, an overactive fear response that kept them alive in an evolutionary sense, to then pass on their overreacting fearful genes. There's a lot of stuff in the book about exposure therapy, repetition, creating these new pathways in your brain. It works. It worked. It was great. It's also fascinating if you're into science and how the brain works and why you are the way you are and why you have the reactions to things that you do. It makes your day-to-day life a little less unconscious when you know what's going on up here and why you're making the irrational decisions that you are making sometimes. And finally, the last book, I almost didn't put this book in because it kind of came at the end of the whole mental health crisis. Unf Yourself by Gary John Bishop. I know you look at the cover, it looks like a self-help grifter type book. It's not. The book is pretty much everything I've discussed so far, all the therapy stuff, cognitive behavioral therapy stuff, acceptance, commitment therapy, exposure therapy. This book is just like all the therapy stuff repackaged. The book is like having a casual conversation with a tough, no nonsense, wise Scottish bro that has your best interest at heart. It's funny. It can be a little self-help griftery a little bit at times. It's definitely less academic and clinical. This book is like spending a few hours with like a tough Scottish therapist guy. I found it very helpful. I got the audiobook also. The audiobook's probably even a better format because he narrates the audiobook and it just sounds like a conversation. But it really synthesizes all the concepts covered in all the other books that I mentioned. So it's helpful for that. But like I said, I have a ton of books about mental health and therapy and self-help stuff because I was desperate. I was trying to save my own life. I remember this one was good, Freeing Yourself from Anxiety by Tamar E. Chansky, PhD. I don't really remember anything specific about it. I mean, I read every book imaginable. That's all I did was obsessively try to fix my brain with all these books. So to sum it all up, I started with the audiobooks because I couldn't sit down and read a book. I could barely sit down and listen to an audiobook. So I walked constantly and lost like 20 pounds. And then I focused in on specific tactics that actually worked for me to alleviate some of the anxiety, a lot of the anxiety. I got deep into the neuroscience to understand what I was actually working with. And then I got into books that kind of synthesized all the information that I'd learned. So if these books could help me, and I was in the absolute depths of mental illness, they can help you too. But you have to actually engage with them and do the work to make the magic happen. And when you think about it, it is magical. You're literally changing the physical structure of your brain with thoughts. It's totally mind over matter. So anyway, since my videos have been getting way more engagement than I expected, especially on TikTok, tell me down in the comments what books have helped your mental health, nonfiction or even fiction. So anyway, I hope you find this video helpful. If these books work for me, they can work for you.